Oh, that's interesting. Okay, now you studied at Juilliard, did you not?
I did. I studied. I went to New York when I was 17, and while I was in New York, I turned 18, and while I was turning 18, the country's at war. And
did you go to war?
Yeah, I was in the service 3 years, and I was drafted from New York City.
Did you fight? Did you go into the music department?
Well, I started in the Air Force, and fortunately, I was assigned to a band, an Air Force band. I was there for a while, and then, for some strange reason, they broke up a lot of the Air Force bands because they needed more soldiers. You know, why they thought that this flute player was going to be a good soldier, I don't know. But I then went to the ground force, and I went through the engineers, and I was in a lot of things. But mostly, fortunately, and thank God, most of it was music.
Mm-hmm. Now, you met Benny Goodman at that time, did you not?
Well, that was before. I went to New York originally to, in addition to going to school, I had done an arrangement for Benny Goodman. My teacher, Max Adkins, in Pittsburgh, had Benny give me a chance to do an arrangement for him, and he liked it very much, and he sent for me. He didn't send for me, but I went to New York, and I wasn't ready at all. I'm 17, you know, and I was not in the prodigy class or the genius class, you know. So I had a lot to learn about what I wanted to do. And Benny said, "Hey, kid, you know, you're not ready." So, but anyhow, it wouldn't have made any difference, really, because I was soon drafted.
When you came back from the war, you started playing in big bands?
Yes, when I was in the service, I made some very good friends who, when the war was over, my best friend, Norman Layden, became like the musical director of the Tex Beneke Glenn Miller Orchestra. It's a Miller band after the war. And I went there and as a pianist and as an arranger, and spent a year there. That's where I met Jenny, my wife, you know.
Oh, 42 years, 43 years actually now. 44 years, sorry.
Next year, after that. Yeah.
But I understand, if I can take 1 second, that you turned her down to start with.
Well, you know, what would you do if you were you're on the road with a band, and there's a lot of action out there. And turned her down. Huh? I guess it wasn't that. I just didn't. I didn't want to.
Get
on the
involved.
road. Yeah, get the picture. You know, she was singing. By the way, she was a singer, and she was singing with a group called the
Meltones?
Well, that was before with Mel Tournay, but the Meadowlarks, and she came with the band, and I was the pianist, so I had to rehearse, teach the group their music, and that's how we got together. But I didn't turn her down for long. I'll tell you that.
Not for very long. She was very influential in your life, wasn't she?
Well, it's because of her that I came out. I came out to be married, but it kind of worked into the overall plan very well, because this is where I wanted to be.
She was from California.
Yes, she was
correct?
a native Californian, and she could not stand. We were back there at one of the worst winters that has been in the East in this century, and she wasn't equipped for it, mentally or even physically, because she hated it. Slush and snow. You know, it used to snow a lot in the East all winter, and it doesn't do that much anymore. That might be a good thing at that.
So now you come to California, and somehow you get on the Universal lot.
Well, there was a few years between 47, we were married in 47, and 1952, I went into Universal to start to start working. I went in for 2 weeks, and I was
in the
there-
music department.
Yeah,
Yes.
I was there 6 years, but it was a great place to learn the trade, my craft really, and I did everything there. In those days, motion picture companies were making 50 to 55 movies a year. And those were all every studio in town was doing that. That's just about that time it started to go down. The television started coming in the mid-50s strong, and by the time 1960 came around, the movie studios were having problems. Some of them had changed over to television. Warner's was smart. Some other studios were smart. Universal was not too smart in that respect. They sold out. They didn't think television was something that was going to be around. Finally, they sold out to MCA, which now owns Universal.
And I really want you to tell me about the fact that at that point you lost your job, and you came one day back to Universal because you had a pass, and you came to get a special haircut. That's the only way I can phrase it.
Any haircut is special for me. It's like seeing an old friend go, everyone.
It really muddled your life afterwards.
Yes, well, I was at Universal about the time, and the music departments had all been dismantled in most of the studios because the studio bands, the studio staff orchestras no longer existed. They found that they were getting fewer and fewer pictures, and they couldn't afford to have a band on staff. In addition to that, all the composers and arrangers, such as myself, were let go at the time. But I was out then, and then I used to come back to go to lunch at the commissary. In those days, Universal was a very sleepy, homey kind of place to be. Not like now, as they call them, the factories, the studios. So I went back and I had my hair cut in the barber shop there, and it's adjacent to the commissary. You come out of the barber shop and the commissary's here, and I was coming out of the barber shop, and Blake Edwards was going in to have lunch with some people. Among them was, in that group, Don Sharp. He had just had a production meeting to see how they were going to do the new show he had called Peter Gunn. And as I was coming out, he was going down, and they were talking about the show, so I guess he asked me if I wanted to do it. Best offer I ever had.
And you have been working with Blake for the last 20 years.
20?
25? 30? 30 years. Oh.
I'm very good at my fingers, yeah. Yeah, 30. We started more than 30. We started 1958 with Peter Gunn. And since that, the new picture that I just finished with him, it's called Switch, is, I think, 25th or 26th we've done together.
You started becoming known on your own and getting your first screen credit at that time, correct? And
during the time at Universal, yeah. But I started to be my own boss because, I was part of a music department at Universal, and had a great head of the department, Joe Gershenson, and he did most of the conducting except for composers who did their own conducting. Hans Salter was one, and Frank Skinner was another. But I never conducted until Peter Gunn. And now they can't get the stick out of my hand.